The Bravo Delta Show, brought to you by Maruti Cement and Seiko.
King Mahendra of Nepal steps forward to exchange greetings with the Queen. The splendor of the scene, by the way, can only be enjoyed to the...
परिवर्तनशील गठबन्धन र फ्याकी हाल्न समेत मिल्ने पातला सम्बन्धहरूको संसारमा नेपाल बेलायत सम्बन्ध केही फरक छ। रगत र सम्मान सरबर मिसिएको सम्बन्ध। समय र प्रकृतिको कसीमा घोटिएको सम्बन्ध। एक प्राचीन हिमालय राज्य र एकताका सूर्य कहिले नअस्ताउने साम्राज्य बीचको 200 वर्षको इतिहास बोकेको सम्बन्ध। नेपाल बेलायत सम्बन्ध कतिपय आधुनिक राष्ट्रहरूभन्दा पनि पुरानो छ, जुन विश्वयुद्धहरू, भूकम्प र अन्य प्राकृतिक विपद अनि विश्वव्यापी व्यवस्थाहरूमा भएका फेरबदलका फलस्वरूप पूर्ण र पुनः फेरिएका आकारहरूमा पनि ठिकठाक अटाएको छ र निरन्तर छ। एकैछिन फर्केर हेरौं। सन् 1816 अघिसम्म पहाडका यी भयंकर गोर्खाली योद्धाहरू भर्खरै नेपालको अस्तित्व रक्षार्थ बेलायतीहरूसँग लडेका छन्। तर अन्ततः शत्रुताको सट्टा सैन्य इतिहासको सबैभन्दा उल्लेखनीय प्लट ट्विस्टहरू मध्येको एउटा समझदारी जन्मन्छ। यिनै योद्धाहरू कालान्तरमा बेलायतका सबैभन्दा भरपर्दा सिपाहीहरू बन्दछन्। कायर हुनुभन्दा मर्नु राम्रो गोर्खालीको पहिचान वाक्य आज पनि उत्तिकै शाश्वत छँदैछ। सुगौली सन्धिपछि सुरु भएको यो बहादुरीको परम्पराको सही मापन हालसम्म गोर्खा सैनिकहरूले थापेका 13 भिक्टोरिया क्रसहरूले गरिरहेको हुन्छ। कुरा सैन्य सम्बन्धको मात्र होइन। 1923 मा बेलायत र नेपालले एक अर्को मित्रता सन्धिमा हस्ताक्षर गरे। नेपालको सार्वभौमिक अस्तित्व स्वीकार्दै आपसी साथ र सहयोगको बाचासहित सुरु भएको यो सम्बन्ध आज विपद राहतदेखि जलवायु परिवर्तनसँग सम्बन्धित पहलहरू, शिक्षा र स्वास्थ्य साझेदारीदेखि पर्यटनसम्मका सबै विषयमा निभाइँदैछ। जहाँ परम्परागत आत्मीयताको सम्झनाहरू अत्याधुनिक विकास परियोजनाहरूसँग मिसिन्छन् र जहाँ प्रत्येक ह्यान्डसेकले 200 वर्षको साझा इतिहासको वजन थामिरहेको हुन्छ। यही ऐतिहासिक सम्बन्धको ताजा विवेचना संयुक्त अधिराज्यका काठमाडौँ स्थित राजदूत रब फेनका साथ। Ambassador Rob Fenn, welcome to the Bravo Delta Show.
Thank you.
राजदूत, आजको यो कुराकानी नेपालीमा गरौँ।
म नेपाली भाषा सिक्दैछु। Next month I'm going actually to some immersion. I'm going to spend both a trek and hopefully as much as 3 weeks in Pokhara, speaking only Nepali. But my worry currently is that I speak Nepali less well than when I arrived, because I worked really hard on it before arriving.
So actually you started learning the language before you got this posting?
Yes.
Or
yes.
after you got the posting?
But after I was appointed, but before I arrived, my ministry was kind enough to pay for me to have tuition. And I had a wonderful teacher here in Kathmandu who I know directly now, but had never met except over Teams, Microsoft Teams, and a teacher in London also, who was a wonderful grammarian, Krishna Pradhan, and he that's how I like to learn a language, through the grammar.
And is it mandatory for a diplomat being posted anywhere in the world to learn the native language?
We have speaker slots and other slots. So this is a speaker slot. So I'm trying to learn the language as fast as possible. It's part of the deal. But no, it's not mandatory. And I think in many places it's not necessary. But I think you will find that ambassadors and indeed diplomats who love their postings will try to learn the language whether they're paid for it or not. It's part of showing that you care.
I've seen you somewhere even writing Nepali.
I love writing Nepali. Devanagari is beautiful. Some of the greatest works of literature appear in that script, and so I love forming the characters. But I have to say that while my comprehension is not bad, as long as it's confined to the sort of things that diplomats hear speeches about, in ordinary kind of daily life, I'm a bit flat-footed. So I hope that next month I will get some kind of colloquial Nepali.
But the alphabet is within you. You know
Yes, I can write the script. Yeah.
Barakhari. It's called Barakhari.
Is it? I thought it was Devanagari.
Devanagari is the script.
Yes.
But the alphabet is, I think, translated as Barakhari.
Okay. Right.
Tell me, did you choose to come to Nepal?
Oh, yes. We compete for everything. And there are pros and cons to that system. When I joined the Foreign Office a long time ago, 1983, you went where you were told. You were barely consulted. And I went to some fantastic places that way. But during my career, we've moved over to a system of bidding and interview. So I had to make a strong pitch. I was locked up in my house in Jakarta during COVID. And suddenly this dream of being ambassador in Nepal sort of popped onto my radar screen. And I fought tooth and nail to get this job. And I don't think I've ever done such a good interview. And I think, it helps when you really want it.
Had you ever visited Nepal before you actually chose to come here?
Oddly enough, I hadn't. My father was also a diplomat. He retired as British High Commissioner in New Delhi. And from there, they did family holidays in Nepal. And so, I grew up wearing T-shirts which said Tiger Tops. And my parents kind of often regarded Nepal as the perfect place for a holiday. And then everyone I seem to know in the UK had already been to Nepal. So I knew a lot about Nepal. I'd obviously met Nepali soldiers, either Nepali army or the British Gorkhas at various other postings. So that part of the sort of mystique of Nepal I'd already encountered. I've done a certain amount of multilateral diplomacy for the UN as well, with the UN. And so my respect for Nepal as a peacekeeping superpower is really strong. So I think that bit attracted me. And then, Nepal has exerted a fascination on the British imagination for more than 200 years. So I'm not unusual in, wanting to come here.
What is being an ambassador? Served in different positions in different countries. And what do you think is being an ambassador to a country?
Well, it's a two-way thing. I think one way of defining it from the London end of the telescope is we want to know what a country will do next. We want to understand and ideally anticipate what that country will do. And you can't do that on the telephone from London. You need people on the ground. That was the kind of diplomacy I sort of grew up with. This is my first posting where we have a significant ODA program. So our development partnership with Nepal is large and long-standing and expert. It requires more than just making Nepal predictable to London. It is about actually helping Nepal in a very concrete way. And I sometimes joke, but it's not a big exaggeration that my job description consists of 2 words, which are help Nepal. And, we do that primarily through our development portfolio. So being an ambassador is also about, the management of British taxpayers' money and making sure it works effectively to do things which the Nepal government wants to see done. It's a partnership in that sense.
I could share my experience when I was a young boy. I had the opportunity of going to a school which was actually gifted by the British government, the Bhusan Dahal school.
Oh, yes, yes.
And that was possible because the government of the day asked for a project as such, and the British government reciprocated and made that possible. So these days, I'm just worried, is the right project requested to governments like Great Britain, who are friends of Nepal?
That's a very good question. I mean, so partnerships, and my new government, the Labour government in the UK, is really big on partnership. They want to make it different and deeper and better. But no, it's not simply paying for things that your host government has nominated. It's very much a negotiation, but a negotiation between partners. And I think, here in Nepal, we have this extraordinary 100 years of friendship, by treaty. So I like to think that we're already on the same page. We don't actually ever differ about the objective when we negotiate with the Ministry of Finance or one of the line ministries. The only time we disagree is about the method. What is the most efficient route to that goal? And we're dealing with professionals, so it's their country, and they usually know the best route there, but not always. Often we have expertise and insights from our other development work, and we bring those to the table. And we're, as you probably know, we're bringing £400 million to this partnership between now and 2030. So it's a significant sum of money. And we're spreading it across the whole waterfront. So some of it is sort of classic. You talked about education. We're working with the Ministry of Education, health, infrastructure, all the things you might imagine when you think about development partnership. But we're also doing some really innovative things around, for example, data. We believe in data-driven decision-making and data-driven development. Inclusion. Our new Minister for International Development is combining that with the big job of women, girls and equalities in the UK. So you can see how we regard these inclusion issues as central to the development process. And then lastly, I might mention the private sector. I mean, the thing that really gets me out of bed in the morning is the hope that I can help keep the kids in the country. That's easy to say, but it's a huge, multifaceted problem, this emigration, which is an experiment on a scale I've not seen elsewhere. And, while it has some silver lining, I think the remittances are significant. They say 25% of GDP. And in a way, it's a progressive money flow because it's going by definition to some of the poorest households across Nepal. But it's making Nepal look richer than it really is, look less fragile than it really is. You look at the macro numbers of this country and they're pretty good. Nepal is, the opposite of a basket case. It has real potential. It has hydro. It has a lot of positive stories around it. But in the heart of that, there is a bit of an emptiness as the kids leave the country. And I think helping slow that down and generate the jobs good jobs, which will keep, bright young Nepalis who are filling good jobs all around the world. We want them to have a chance to do that here.
And I'm very aware that a diplomat has difficulties answering political questions, so I don't want to delve in that area. But what have you given us as a backdrop of our conversation today. We have more than 2 centuries of nation to nation, people to people, household to household, and probably monarchs to monarch relationships. And then came the Gorka recruitment. The trend still continues. If I may ask, how many of them are serving at the moment, if you have the numbers?
Well, the brigade is at least 2,000 men. The phenomenon of Nepalis in the British Army is a much bigger number, because once they have finished serving with the Brigade of Gorkhas, they can and sometimes do choose to join another regiment and stay in the British Army, and they're very popular. Nepali. So British Gorkhas join other parts of the British Army, and there are many, many more than the number I gave across the whole British Army. But we like to say that the Brigade of Gorkhas itself sustains 5% of the British Army, which is already a huge figure. So you can understand our attachment to this phenomenon.
So that is one link. The other thing, as you mentioned, that trade and the involvement of private sector in increasing the trade, and the migration out of Nepal that you mentioned. I think even Great Britain is one of the destinations for quite a few Nepalese. Then comes the government-to-government cooperation, regular cooperation, and in the times of crisis, as we just faced a couple of weeks ago, the floods, and you're the first governments to actually extend your concern and sympathies to the
Not just me, my king. It was a wonderfully personal note that he sent to the president.
Yes, and I think that actually reiterates our relationship. But there is one, public concern that we have such a well-knit relationship, but when we ask for a visa to visit the UK, our passports are sent to Delhi.
I know about this. So can I tell you what I've discovered? Because honestly, I completely get how frustrating that is. It's frustrating for me because I get drawn into these bureaucratic and sort of logistical problems, which often sort of take the gloss off the story, which is so positive. Even at the level of individual families, I'm just so pleased that people might send their children to a British university. That's just a good thing. And if they then have difficulty with visas, even though there's absolutely no immigration risk, this is not about people who won't come back again or don't have the means to support their children. It's just about, getting the tick in the box. That is frustrating that it has to be done through something called a vignette. That there is a physical thing that gets put in a passport that is your visa. UK visas and our Home Affairs Ministry is moving to a fully, what they call digital by default system. They're moving away from physical documents. Your immigration status will be online and accessible by you and by anyone who wants to check it online centrally. And that means that the problem you mentioned is about to disappear. I don't have a date exactly for when we will stop having to procure the vignettes from Delhi. Very rarely does the passport go all the way to Delhi, but or at least the individual doesn't have to go to Delhi to get it, because we have a front office here in Kathmandu. But in the future, we won't have vignettes. All you'll have to do is, you'll still have to apply, you'll still have to give the biometric, but it can all be done in Kathmandu. And as it were, your immigration status is an online thing, not a physical thing. So that's going to be very good news. They're starting with those who have, indefinite leave to remain. Some of these people who have very, very long-term visas. I think by as early as January, that will all be online. So it stands to reason that fairly soon next year, we will end this kind of to and fro with Delhi and vignettes. I just don't have the date. But honestly, I am going to be the first one cheering when this happens. I think
I asked you this question at the right time, I guess.
You did, actually. Yes, you did.
I wouldn't say controversy. probably it's a controversy, that Brigade of Gorkhas has been always meant by the Nepalese youngsters, and they serve for a certain time. In the end of their tenures, after they become pensioners, then the problem arises, they say. Is it a fair complaint that the British Gorkhas have against the British establishment, that they don't get their fair share in pensions and other benefits?
The Bravo Delta Show, brought to you by Maruti Cement and Seiko.
Brigade of Gorkhas has been always meant by the Nepalese youngsters, and they serve for a certain time. In the end of their tenures, after they become pensioners, then the problem arises, they say. Is it a fair complaint that the British Gorkhas have against the British establishment, that they don't get their fair share in pensions and other benefits?
Well, I'm glad you added the last part, because that's where the solution lies. There is an issue. I'm not going to pretend that everyone is happy. But if I may, I'll tell you my understanding of the situation. The first thing to say is that the British government, and particularly the British military, are determined that veterans have what they call a dignified retirement. That's something they want for every veteran. And I've heard it from our senior General Sir Patrick Sanders came here last year, presented the report on the Brigade of Gorkhas activities to the Honourable President. And there, his rhetoric around dignified retirement is absolutely authentic. And I think the new British government will be no different. They want all our veterans to retire with dignity. Another thing that happened when I first arrived was that I saw how we look after veterans who retire in Nepal. So we have the Gorkha Welfare Trust spread across the hills and valleys of Nepal. The first time I ever had tikka put on my forehead was by a widow in the mountains who had, she'd just received her retrofitted earthquake-resistant house. She was getting her pension, some of her medical supplies by drone. It is a really slick operation to look after veterans in this country. The issue arises in respect of those who retired before 1997. So after that date, so for the last 25 years, no one's complaining because they can't, because actually pension provision is identical, regardless of your nationality or where you were born. So what we're talking about is people who retired before 1997. Again, those are arguably the most popular and sort of cherished veterans in the UK. Some of them fought in World War. All of them are kind of part of this mystique of loyal Gorkhas, loyal Nepal. So it hurts us that there is controversy in that area. The controversy arises because the pension designed before 1997 was to be spent in Nepal. That was where Gorkhas retired. It was actually a very generous system in those days. It was regarded as more generous than the alternative that British veterans got. It could be taken earlier and for longer than the regular British Army pension, and often added up to more money over time. But it was designed as an income for Nepal. And then as a side effect of another nice thing which happened, which reflects the kind of gratitude that the British people feel to the British Gorkhas, was that another part of their package became a right to settle in the UK, the indefinite leave to remain, become British citizens. And then, of course, that the spending power of a pension designed to be spent in Nepal, but actually being spent in Aldershot or somewhere, that was a problem. And so I absolutely get it that the cost of living in the UK has been tough for people in that cohort.
Not to say the cost of living here is any less these
Yeah,
days.
well, the world is expensive, but my point is that we recognise that there has been hardship.
Yes.
It is about how to fix it.
Is it being fixed?
So I hope it will be fixed as soon as next year. I have real personal engagement with this issue, because it's like the grit and the oyster. It's the one thing that really is at issue between the two peoples, not really between the two governments, but as you're right to point it out. But the trouble is that the solution requested by the people who speak for this cohort turns out to be the very one thing, the very one type of solution which the British government cannot give, and that is retrospective pension uplift. And that's not, I guess, because the MOD don't want to give it. It's because our Treasury, our Ministry of Finance,
and the repercussions.
It's about the international pension industry. Pensions are a kind of contract. They're sort of intergenerational, and the terms into which you buy into a pension, cannot be changed. I'd love to change my pension retrospectively, but
probably the retrospection would lead us to areas which we actually only want to remain in history books.
Maybe. I mean, this is for the financiers, but the policymakers in the Ministry of Defence do worry about the spending power of this group of veterans. And the thing is, in the UK, we have plenty of people whose income is inadequate. And to meet those circumstances, we have something called a welfare state. There are safety nets, social safety nets. No one should be hungry. Everyone should have access to education, health, and so on. So the welfare state is generous, but it is also complicated.
Yes.
And, I have had to help my own mother, navigate the welfare state in the UK. And it's, you need, and I need my own sons to look after me, when I fill in forms. So it's no surprise that some elderly veterans find it difficult to get what they're entitled to. And they're entitled to a lot. And that's why, it is to balance out the size of their pension. So it's in this area of welfare, a kind of hand-holding approach to welfare entitlement, that our Ministry of Defence is trying to provide a solution. And I do hope in the course of this year, or anyway as soon as possible, we can engage with the people whom we want to help. We can persuade them that this thing needs to be approached in a problem-solving way, rather than a kind of debate about discrimination, because it really isn't. And that they should ask for some of the many things which the British government can give.
And there is another interesting and a very harsh question that I may want to ask. Do you still need the Gorkhas?
Ooh, if you ask our Ministry of Defence, they would say yes. I mean, they are outstanding soldiers. And the military loves traditions, Ain't broke, don't fix. The Gorkhas are popular, they're effective. We need them. Obviously, we wouldn't collapse without them, but we would be weaker. And we wouldn't have that. It brings up the hair on your forearms, when you think about what Gorkhas have done, all those medals they've won. It makes the British Army look a lot better.
A Gorkha soldier, how up in ranks can he climb in the British Army?
Well, I know a Colonel Rajesh, who's here at British Gorkhas Nepal. That's the most senior officer I've met. But
Is there a provision
I'm not a military person, but
is there a provision for interested youngsters to go and fight in the commissioned army ranks?
To be honest, if they join other regiments, I'm sure the answer to that is there's no ceiling. They will rise as high as they want. The Brigade of Gorka does have traditions, and I don't know exactly whether there is a limit to how high you can rise. But most of those traditions do make sense. The way
No, I was just curious. It's called the Brigade of Gorkhas, and we as Nepalese would be cherishing a moment when a Gorkha soldier becomes at least a brigadier.
Yeah.
In the brigade of
No, that would be
Gorkhas.
good, wouldn't it? I'll find out. I mean, I simply don't know.
All right. This was a very important area we had to indulge in this interview. But elsewhere, I think there are so many achievements that the British people and the government have achieved thus far that we can learn and exchange ideas of and probably emulate and replicate in Nepal. Your NHS, I think it's probably one of the most effective health services. It has its downsides too, but at the same time, it's a very effective health system. That's what we're told.
It's been very good to me.
And is there any way that Nepali health workers and the health professionals and the Ministry of Health learn and achieve our health goals in the future?
Yeah. So, I mean, health is a large part and a long-standing part of our development partnership. There's some things on top of that which I might mention. But, I mean, first of all, we've been involved with Nepal's Ministry of Health for decades, both spending directly. It's probably the area where we give most kind of on-treasury, sort of direct cash support to health services in Nepal. We are moving into what we call system strengthening.
Yes.
And that's because we want the system to be resilient. So there's a lot of advice and sort of co-learning that goes on between, as it were, our two health services. So the team who do health in the British Embassy are spending a lot of time with health professionals from both countries, looking at things like, human resource management, recruiting, training, these sorts of things.
And health facilities management.
Health facilities. So I had a lot of fun going to Bhaktapur Hospital, which we have helped retrofit after the earthquake. So we've also been involved in the sort of infrastructure side of it. But it is mainly about the way the health system is governed and planned and rolled out across the country. In Nepal, you're going through a number of transitions, and one of them is about the central tier of government working with the provinces, and obviously things like health and education are partly centralized and partly local, and we have that same tension in the UK. So helping Nepal navigate that is a big part of our program. Can I very quickly tell you about Dr. Das? I tell everyone this story, but it was when I was investigating our 100th anniversary of the Treaty of Friendship. So I had the number 100 in my head. And when I was talking to the ABAN, the organization of alumni from British universities here, they said, we have one of our members who is 100 years old. And I met this man, and goodness me, he was impressive. I mean, very lively, switched on, 100-year-old who had been to the UK in the 1950s. He'd gone to the UK before you could fly out of the valley. He had to go by boat from Calcutta. It took him something like 16 days to get there. And it took him 40 days to get back because he ran into the Suez Canal crisis. That's how old it was. This is the history books. But here he was, large as life. When he came back from his medical training in the UK, from what I could tell, he effectively started public health policy in Nepal. So that's, in a way, that's how far back our collaboration on health goes.
Do you remember his name?
Das, Dr. Das, I think was his name.
I'll look him up.
Yeah, he's well worth. I do hope he's alive and well. And he was part of my, to the joy of celebrating 100 years of friendship.
And your tenure here is just almost a year plus, right?
Just over a year. Yeah, we arrived in July 2023.
And besides your ambassadorial, your official duties, I see you getting indulged in several of our cultural moments. I've seen you taking a holy bath at the Muktinath temple, and we even saw you putting tika for Dasai. So was it a diplomatic gimmick, or it just, something triggered
Well,
you to get into this?
There's a bit of gimmickry, if you like. I mean, obviously, with social
I'm
media.
not accusing you for that.
No, I'm always slightly conscious that if you do it with the wrong kind of spirit,
No.
probably not in Nepal, but in certain countries, you'd be accused of sort of cultural appropriation or something. But for me, and honestly, I think in this respect, I'm no different from all the other British people who come to this country and are enchanted. It is just about, having the whole experience, absolutely understanding what my Nepali friends feel. I'm very interested in culture and religion and the sort of spiritual side of life. And I think Nepal is an inherently spiritual place. It's no surprise. This is where Lord Buddha was born, where some of the great texts of world religion and culture grew up in the sort of Sanskrit area. I had such fun going down to Janakpur and discovering I was on the Ramayana circuit, and this was the the center of romance for so many Hindus and beyond. And I'm hoping to go back there with my wife, because the priest in charge at the Janati temple was a bit put out that I'd come without my wife. And he said, but you should come back and renew your vows. So I need to do that. So, for me, it is authentic. I actually regard it as useful for my work, but also an expression of my own personality. I had the opportunity to kind of put it into words in the in-flight magazine for Buddha Air. And that was a real challenge, because honestly, there weren't many sort of words. I only had one word limit, and how to express the joy of traveling in a country so varied. And I think there's something there around the way geography has formed culture and has made Nepal this patchwork of different, fiercely different traditions. I was in Bhaktapur for Dasein, and there found myself totally immersed in the 9 goddesses renewal tradition. And I had the great sort of honor to meet the Bhaktapur Kumari as she was carried past in the street. And then we went to see where the 9 goddesses, who turn out to be men in white robes, ready to put on the masks and assume the role of protector of the city for another year. That whole thing was, and all the drumming and every single neighborhood in Bhaktapur seems to have a sort of percussion band from 5 o'clock in the morning. It was a blast. So there are many times in my life in Nepal where I have to sort of pinch myself and say, you really are being paid to do this? It seems unreasonable.
The exchange of visits between personalities of Britain and personalities from Nepal making very significant visits. We've seen many kings of ours visiting to the UK, and the Queen and the present King of Great Britain also has visited Nepal several times. And I, as a young boy in school, had the privilege of shaking his hand as a young student. And, those are very cherished moments. But nowadays, for the past 10 years, such visits have decreased or discouraged. You as a diplomat, do you think a high-level exchange of visits that tells a larger story between the two countries are important in this day and age?
Yeah, 100%. So I think it's very much my job, and live correspondence about getting senior visitors here, and in the other direction. So I am talking to my bosses in London about sequencing that. It's not the case, I think, that there have been none. I think if you have that sense that it's probably to do with COVID and the way things kind of shut down for a while, there's certainly no lack of keenness to come to Nepal. I think the next ministerial visitor is likely to be our Minister for Development. And in fact, that was the last visitor we had. So her predecessor, Andrew Mitchell, came not many months ago and had a very big visit. And we flew around in that wonderful white helicopter and saw a lot of the country. And your government made him very welcome. And he helped us kind of launch our new development portfolio. And his philosophy, there's a thing called the white paper, which is kind of still our kind of philosophy of development, which our new government is kind of modernizing a bit, but will certainly hold true in Nepal. Means that his successor wants to come back and see how it's working. So it's only a matter of time before Annalise Dodds comes here. I fondly hope we will have royal visits of one sort or another. I would love to see senior Nepali ministers go to the UK. And I know my own Foreign Secretary, David Lammy, is very keen to travel. He's a new style foreign minister. He loves traveling with other ministers. He's kind of, other foreign ministers. So he's very kind of expeditionary. And I can imagine him coming through the region to Nepal at some point, unless his Nepali colleague gets him first in London. We'll see. We'll see what happens. I'm well aware that the most outstanding visit is the Prime Minister. People tell me there's never been a British Prime Ministerial visit to Nepal. So I really want that to be put right during my time here. During the length of this Parliament in the UK, I think is a realistic hope. So, again, you've asked this question at exactly the right moment. This is a live correspondence with the new ministers in London. I've given them what people like to call an elevator pitch. But why Nepal actually is very hard to fit into an elevator pitch, because Nepal has significance under almost every single personal objective of David Lammy and of these sort of self-declared missions of the new government. So it's very easy to demonstrate the importance of a visit to Nepal. It's just about sequencing.
And I read that somewhere, or I just, was surfing the net, that you have a favorite Nepali word.
I have two so far, but there'll be more.
Which one are they?
So I started with Rangi Changi because for me it meant holy, and we as a family went and got so multicolored downtown.
There's Rangi Changi. The other one?
The other one was Mitrata because of the 100 years of friendship, treaty of friendship. I'm wondering whether the next one should be something to do with cooking, because I had this extraordinary opportunity.
Do you cook?
No, I'm a very bad cook, and but you have a number of very good ones in this country, and one of them, Santosh Shah, who's British, but Nepali, and a winner of MasterChef, which is our premier cooking competition, and. It was just great fun around Dasain to go to his kitchen, cook some dishes, film it. So yes, gimmickry if you like, but actually I was having a ball, and what a wonderful man. So I think perhaps my next word will be something culinary.
I didn't want to actually. We have time constraint, but. This conversation will continue, Ambassador. Two Nepali words you just mentioned. I think one is Rangi Changi. I think the color of our flags are pretty much the same. It has different shape and meanings, but I think we share the color, the Rangi Changi flags of the two countries, and Mitrata of diplomatic ties between Britain and Nepal.
Yes,
that's a long way. That we've
200 years of actual kind of relations.
Yes.
200 plus.
Yes.
But in 1923, we signed this unique treaty, which...
Can we call it the diplomatic relations began then?
No, I think they preceded that. I think there were diplomatic relations before that. 1923. Yeah. Why we've made a fuss about the treaty,
Friendship Treaty.
The Friendship Treaty was kind of Nepal's passport to the United Nations. but was also, and this is quite significant historically, I think, meant that Nepal was self-evidently, never colonized, never conquered fiercely itself. By the time India came to be independent. So there was never any thought that Nepal should be sort of packaged with India. These were two different sovereign states. And I think the role of our Treaty of Friendship in that moment is important for the world.
So that is the centennial we're celebrating.
That's the centennial that we celebrated in December last year. And honestly, the rest is just me riffing on the word friendship, because it's such a lovely thing to think that we have a treaty of friendship. Most treaties are sort of dull about international relations, but this is about friendship. And honestly, I think that does capture something about the way our two peoples interact. British people come here. Yes, we've got the government stuff, but the reason why the British government invests so heavily in Nepal, I mean, to talk pounds, shillings, and pence for a second, is because it's popular. If you ask the man or woman on the street in London, should we be doing development partnership with Nepal, they would say, well, of course. Nepal's a friend and an ally, and we've got history with them. So that's friendship.
So I think to our friendship and your time, and thank you very much for granting this opportunity to talk to you, Ambassador, and look forward to talking to you more in the future.
That will be my pleasure.
Have a very enjoyable tenure in Nepal.
Thank you so much.